Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Property Risk Academy Introduction to Incident Investigation. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'll just give it a minute or two to wait for any stragglers to join, and then we'll get cracking. Okay, I think we should make a start. Welcome, everyone. I'm here with my colleagues today, Donal O'Hanlon and Morgan Bleak, and we'll be talking through the presentation today. I'm Matt Kiernan, risk engineer at Protector. I've been at the business about 5.5 years now, and my specialties are in property risk management and incident investigation. So I'll hand over now to Morgan.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Property Risk Management Academy, October 2025. I'm a fellow risk engineer with Protector Insurance, and I've been with Protector for over 2 years, specifically as a property risk engineer. Over to you, Donal.
Morning, everybody, and welcome. Donal O'Hanlon. I'm sure many of you know me. I'm a risk engineer with Protector, been with the business for coming up to 9 years in early November. I specialise in property on property, BI, public sector, housing and commercial. I have a deep interest in waste sites. Just to let everybody know that we're recording this presentation. So if you don't want to be notified, if you don't want to be involved, just make sure that you don't go through on the chat. The slides will be available after the presentation, and we do ask for your feedback at the end of the presentation. One thing to note, we will be operating the Slido app to enable interaction between yourselves and ourselves. So if you can join now on your mobile or on web app on slido.com, the activation code number is 1758392. So if you go to slido.com, either on your phone or on a spare screen on your, or in a backup screen on your PC, and type in slido.com and use that number, which is 1758392. I'll add that to the chat so that you can refer to it as we go through. The presentation will take at most 90 minutes, and we don't have any planned fire alarms. Morgan and Matt and I are in 3 different locations. I'm in the office, and I'm hoping that there are no fire alarms, as there have been recently. For those of you who've been to these presentations before, I cannot assure you that I have checked the table legs this time, and it doesn't appear that anything is going to fall off this time. So there will be opportunity for you to get involved. Verbal questions are recommended via hand raised in the chat function, which I will just show you now. It's there we go. It looks like that. And obviously, you can also use the Slido to provide your answers. I'll be monitoring the chat function, so hopefully I'll be able to do more than one thing at once. And just to remind you again, slido.com, and the join number is 1758392, and I will put that into the chat now. Okay. So as many of you know, that Protector, we see ourselves as the challenger. And what does this mean in this presentation? Well, we like to challenge the market norms and people's perceptions of insurers. And also we like to think about the philosophy of risk and Protector as the challenger. So the question for us is this just the job of the loss adjuster? or can a risk engineer add value in a post-loss scenario? So in terms of our DNA, this is all about being a cost and quality leader and being credible and committed to you as our clients. Next slide, please, Matt. So this is the content for the day. We'll start with the incident investigation process. That will be the 5-step process. We'll introduce a case study of vacant property loss. We'll then move on to an escape of water incident investigation and a post-loss review case study for escape of water and for a residential block fire. We'll then conclude, hopefully proving that what we said is correct, and we'll ask for your opinion of that at the end. So it's up to us three to ensure that we deliver on our promises. If anybody has any questions, as I say, please raise your hand in the chat function and I'll try and keep a watchful eye on that. Okay, thanks very much. We'll now move on to the incident investigation process. So I'd like to call on Matt to come forward and introduce this section.
Thank you very much, Donal. I didn't realise you were such a whiz with technology, putting your hands up and sharing the Slido code with everyone. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so just before we start this section, I'd just like to start with a quick poll on slido.com as Donal's introduced. So the code 151758392. So the question is, do you think that incident investigation is cyclical or is it a linear process? So I'll just wait for a few votes to come up on screen and I'll talk through the answer on the following slide. And there is a reason we are asking this today. It will lead into today's presentation, but we are getting quite a few votes, majority going for cyclical, about 70-30 split just there. I'll just wait for a few more votes and then we'll move on. But it's worth getting involved early on in Slido because we will have quite a few of these throughout the presentation just to keep you engaged and break up the presentation a little bit. Okay, great. So I'll take it there, about 75% split for cyclical and 25% for linear. Thanks for everyone getting involved in the first poll. The reason we've asked this is about this slide really. So we've got both the linear process on the left-hand side and the cyclical process on the right-hand side. So the left-hand side, we like to say protected. This applies to an individual loss. So we can add mitigations following a loss and we can follow up, but it's contained to the loss or the singular loss in question. The right-hand side, we like to treat as a policy level basis. So each loss is treated as a learning point and we can apply mitigations throughout the portfolio. So what we want from our clients is our clients to be able to take cyclical level incident investigation as a habit. Of course, having said that, we don't want our clients to have multiple losses. If you're not familiar with this already, then you're in the right place by logging on to today's webinar, and hopefully you'll be more familiar following the presentation. Full incident investigation is proactive, and what we want to do today is share the wider benefits of this to be able to make sure that our clients are able to commit to following the process fully. So myself, Morgan and Donal as risk engineers enter this circular process between the root cause and potential mitigations. Following losses will help you alter processes by providing guidance on best practice. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides is run through each of the steps in the process. But first, I'd like to ask another quick question. So on Slido again, can you please tell us where you end your investigation process? So just think back to the last few incidents you've had on a property basis. Which stage of the process are you at? So are you taking no measures? Are you undertaking basic investigation? Are you undertaking detailed investigations and determining the root cause? Are you hopefully determining the root cause and then applying corrective actions? And then step 5, are you getting the root cause, applying the mitigations to a wider use across your portfolio. Okay, that's great. Got a great number of responses so far. And it looks like most of you on the call today are experts already, so we've got a lot to live up to in today's presentation. But the whole point of the poll is just to get you thinking about each step, and then also to give us an idea of what we're up against. Like I say, polls are anonymous, so don't be shy. We can hope to see a few 1s, 2s and 3s, but yeah, it's a great job you're already at 4 and 5. So as I say, I'll just talk through the process. So I've got the first couple of steps on this slide. The first step, it's easy, suffer an incident. So say you have an incident, say you have a fire or an escape of water or a flood event. The first steps really secure the scene. So cordon off, protect the evidence, use barrier tape and cones if you need to, and identify the evidence sources, and also make sure to report the incident to Protector. Step 2, so once you've reported the incident, then investigation can begin. So it can involve the claimant, our claims handlers, and potentially loss adjusters and other specialist investigators for large and complex claims. What we want to do here is gather the required information, make sure we take photographs and obtain witness statements. And the aim of this is to fully understand the extent of the damage. Also, any relevant CCTV footage can be obtained, and this is to understand the incident in a bit more detail. I'm not going to spend too long on this slide just because it's the basics of incident investigation. The real meat and content of today's presentation is in steps 3, 4 and 5. Okay, so step 3 is all about root cause analysis. So this is probably the most crucial step, and it's determining the root cause, which is the primary event that led to the loss. It's not about assigning any blame, but understanding the core root of the problem to be able to prevent a similar incident from happening again. So what we don't want to do is stop at any immediate causes or underlying causes. We've got more on these causes later from Morgan. And remember that the root cause is rarely, if ever, human error. So I've got 3 methods to determine the root cause on screen now. The first of which is the 5 whys. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with this, and I should say that it's a guide only. So you can ask why more than 5 times, but generally it's not recommended to ask why less than 5 times to ensure that you do get to the true root cause. So all the 5 whys is an iterative process, peeling back the layers of the problem and hopefully getting to the root cause. All we do is ask why repeatedly until we reveal the root cause. So I've just got an example on screen now. So say we've had a fire in a warehouse. So we're just going to ask, why have we had a fire in the warehouse? Because there was an electrical fault in a conveyor belt motor. Why was that? Because the motor overheated. Why did it overheat? Because it wasn't properly maintained. Why was that? Because we didn't follow the maintenance schedule. And why was that? The maintenance manager operates a paper-based maintenance system, which is located in their office, and they were on holiday for 2 weeks. And why was that? There's no previous funding for a computerized maintenance system. So I'll talk through that example again on the next slide, but I just want to talk through the second method of root cause analysis, which is the fishbone diagram. Again, some of you may be familiar with this, where we put the problem at the head of the fish, or the loss. So we put the complete loss of the warehouse due to fire. And then the bones of the fish, we'd split the categories up. So we'd have human factors, method, machinery, materials, environment, and measurement. So in these categories, we'd list the potential cause of the incident. So for example, under machine, we could list the motor and faulty wiring. And under method, we could note the improper storage of flammable material. Subcauses within the bones are analysed and used to pinpoint the most likely root causes to investigate further. And the third method to determine the root cause on screen now is the fault tree analysis. primarily used for more complex losses or scenarios. At the top of the hierarchy, we'd put the incident, and we'd use the tree-like diagram with logic gates to break down and identify causes that led to the incident, and they can get fairly complex, as I say. But let's move back to the process and the warehouse fire from the 5 whys. So the next step of the process, step 4, is to identify potential mitigations. So we need to identify the root cause first, and then we develop an action plan that provides a clear long-term solution. So the solution could involve design change, a process update, additional training, rather than just replacing the failed part. What we want to do is assign ownership for each collective action within the business to ensure accountability. So from the earlier example of the warehouse fire caused by a lack of maintenance to the motor, an action could be to replace the motor. We could also have an action to develop a computerized maintenance schedule for all pieces of equipment within the warehouse. Or we could also use condition monitoring tools and sensors to collect real-time data on all motors and equipment within the warehouse. So we could measure the vibration, temperature, and electric current throughout these. What we want to do is analyze this data to predict potential failures before they occur. So you can see, based on these actions, one of the weaker actions would be to just replace the motor. But the best quality action is not only to develop a computerized maintenance schedule, but to implement condition monitoring on all pieces of equipment, such as motors in the warehouse. So we're trying to learn as widely as possible from each loss. And then step 5, so what we want to do, or what you should do as the client, is apply across your portfolio. This is probably the most crucial step in addition to the root cause, and it's applying the lessons from the incident to other properties and buildings. What it does is transforms a reactive claims process into a proactive risk management strategy, and this is where we see the cycle of continuous improvement. The above action should be replicated across the warehouse and all other warehouses operated by the client. And then after implementing these solutions, we can use KPIs to track mean time between failures to verify the effectiveness of our control measures. And if the problem returns, we may have addressed a causal factor instead of the root cause issue, and we may need to dig into a deeper root cause in the future. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Donal, who will link this incident investigation process to a case study.
Thanks very much, Matt. Okay, so this is a real case scenario that I came across. These are my actual photographs from the site post-loss. What we're trying to determine here is how prior incident investigation from this loss could help prevent future losses at similar sites. Okay, in this case, there was theft damage by travellers. The travellers got onto site and they stole the copper cables because the incoming electrical supply was isolated from the incoming HV room. So the HV location was located just outside the site. The travellers broke in, turned off the incoming electric and then stole some of the cable there, then got onto site and continued to steal the cable because they knew that the incoming power was switched off. This was an ongoing situation. The travellers remained on site. It was a weekend and the premises were normally closed at weekend. So the travellers remained on site, and the mains electricity board came along and they looked at the position of the electrical installation and decided it was no longer safe to provide power to the site. So they switched it off for safety reasons. Switching the power off at the mains led to the magnetic locks unlocking on the fire exit doors because there was no longer any power to it. So normally there would be a backup power supply, but that backup power supply had run out after 4 hours, and the mag locks unlocked. The issue for insurers at this point is that there is no forcible or violent entry or exit. So on many property damage policies, there is a restriction that it must be subject to forcible entry or exit. In this case, clearly there wasn't. The magnetic locks simply disconnected and the doors were capable of being opened. So what happened was that there was theft of plant and stock, and it was a food processing risk, and the children of the travellers hot-wired some of the forklift trucks and began to play dodgems in the forklift trucks, and in doing so smashed the trucks into some of the machinery that was still on site, and also pierced some of the food bags with the forks from the forklift trucks. The claim cost was in the millions, and I suppose the lesson learned was that we had a similar case where a client of ours had delayed their relocation from one site to another because the new site that they were going into had suffered from stolen electrical cables whilst the premises were vacant, whilst they were waiting to go in. So we were learning all the time about the modus operandi of the travellers, how they worked, how they could get into a premises without necessarily breaking and entering. Had we been to this site before? Yes, we had. Had we been to the site since the neighbour had vacated? No, we hadn't. So the neighbour was actually the landlord to the site. And what we've got to ask ourselves then is, when the neighbour had moved out, what happened? Well, the neighbour's premises were actually broken into first, and that neighbouring premises adjoined and communicated with our client's premises via a doorway. The question then arises, was there a material change to the risk? Well, sort of, but not definitively. That neighbouring doorway could be blocked up with a concrete block or any other method, and there would be no significant material change to this client's risk. So in the photographs there, you can see the electrical incoming panels on the left-hand side, where it's the power is dropped down, and all those cupboard doors, those electrical cupboard doors, the doors have been ripped off, and the copper cabling that normally would run along the ceiling and drop down into those has been stolen. You can see just a few cables remain on the right-hand side in the orange sheaths, but actually the top of the room would have had those cables transferring down into those drop-down boxes. On the right-hand side, you can see the incoming power, where what we will call the nefarious miscreants have actually got in to a caged area and pulled them out and stripped them of the copper. So you can see one of the machines on the right hand, the incoming power on the right hand side has been actually pulled out of those bays. So thinking back to the root cause analysis, let's move on to the next slide, please, Matt, so that we can understand exactly what had happened and what we would want to do about it. So the landlord, as I said, the landlord had vacated and those unwanted visitors had arrived. They'd gone into the landlord's portion of the premises, and the landlord was thinking of making a claim, but actually couldn't, because their cover had been restricted down to debris removal only cover, so no claim could be made. There was nothing stolen because there was no theft cover. The landlord had contracted a single security guard, but that contract was with the landlord and not with our insured. So there was no insurable interest, or there was no contract between our insured and that security guard. Thing to note that although the plant was old, it was operational and it was due to be upgraded when they were planning to move to new premises. The client was obviously aware of the neighbouring problems, the travellers getting onto the site, but we as the insurers were not notified. The interesting point about this site is that there were innumerable entry points. The premises were built, I think, as a shadow munitions factory in the Second World War. So there were secure facilities, but then the office areas had lots and lots of windows. The roof was what we call a sawtooth roof. It was concrete, but it was north lighted, so there were large areas of windows to the roof as well. So with those considerations and knowing that the miscreants had got in at some stage, we needed to think about the onion peel effect of security, which is where we have layers of security throughout the site, which start on the perimeter and get further layers and harder to get into the premises as you get further into the premises, until you get to the most precious element that's required to run the business. And that, you know, if the miscreants get into there, as with an onion, when you get to the center of it, you start to cry. If the miscreants have got to the center of the your business, then you will have tears at the end of it. So the 5 whys we need to ask here is, why was there a break-in? Analysis, we need to understand what happened, why it was the case. Well, clearly this was an easy target. The entry and exit points, once the travellers got onto site, were unmonitored. There was a single security guard at the estate entrance, and he wasn't patrolling. Why did that break-in occur? Because of lack of security. Why was there no lack of security? Because there was no insurable interest between the contract security guard and our insured. Why was that? Because our insured, the tenant, relied on the landlord to undertake this, and they weren't allowed, so they thought, to actually put their own security guard in. And why was that a problem? Well, it was basically poor communication. Demolition was imminent to the premises. There was excuse me, there was no future at the site because the site was being demolished for a housing estate which was growing up around it. That housing estate was being built, but the premises, the houses, were not being occupied immediately until the roads had been built and the infrastructure was in place. So you had new buildings around it, but no occupancy, so no oversight of the risk. In the photographs to the right, you can see that there were lots of doors and windows which were easily accessible. In the first picture, you can see a nice big HV sign there indicating to these particular miscreants where the most attractive goods would be located. So you've got a green timber door, not very secure, no steel lining to it. The photo to the right shows some of the steel cables that were lined up to be stolen. If they came back, they would have taken those, but they take the most valuable cables, which is the copper cables, to start with, leave those steel cables in place and come back for them later. Some of the measures that the client took were to brick up interior walls between the works and the factory area, but it didn't really leave a lot of a nice picture for a place to work. That was an office area, and you can see on the right hand side where the miscreants had actually left their ladders in place to get up onto the roof to access the north lighted roof, to be able to come back and steal further products. So lots of entry points, well signposted to the HV room. The less valuable cables were left, and the access points were innumerable, and the criminals had left their access equipment as well as the cat ladders that you can see in the bottom of the picture. There were also ladders at the top. In fact, what you can see behind the cat ladder there is a piece of steel which was designed to prevent people climbing up the cat ladder who weren't allowed access, and the thieves just used a bolt crop to bolt crop the padlock and then just lent that piece of steel at the side. On to the next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so this is fairly simplistic. The root cause of this was a lack of communication on the risks, the losses that the landlord had suffered, the security arrangements between the stakeholders. And as stakeholders, I would include us, the insurers, with this. The security guards are often minimum wage, not expected to put their life on the line for a property loss. And one of the things that we learned from this was that in failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. Knowing that there'd been a break-in by multiple miscreants to the neighbouring premises, we should have been able to help our client secure the premises here. The top photograph shows how steel cable was tied round the top of the some of the electrical equipment and was simply yanked off the plant. And then at the bottom, you can see the layout of the plant on the left-hand side with the relatively old looking machinery in there, but it was a fairly linear manufacturing process where you need a long line of processing. So that's how it looked. In the middle, you can see that the electrical cabinets, there was no cabling any longer going into the top of them along the metal conduit because it had been stolen. And the result is that to the right, you can see that there are no longer any machinery and plant in place, because if you haven't got electrical apparatus to supply power to the equipment, then there's no need for the equipment. So the root cause for us was helping us to stop another such loss either here or elsewhere. And the thing that we need to stress is that insurers can learn these lessons on your behalf. We can share it with you so that you don't suffer that loss. So in that sense, this cyclical nature, it doesn't necessarily always have to be you that suffers multiple losses. If we suffer a loss, which is what we're here to help you prevent, then we can help learn those lessons and pass that information onto the market. So in failing to prepare and preparing to fail, what went wrong? Well, the security company knew that if there was multiple miscreants coming onto site, intimidating and putting the security guard under duress, they didn't have a system to get multiple security guards and dogs on site from an immediate call out from the guard. So that was the lack of preparation. And we now suggest that whenever there is access by multiple miscreants, such as in this case, that you prepare and have a policy and a plan with your security guarding company to learn this lesson. Okay, next slide, please. So moving on, I'll now suggest that we look at the escape of water incident investigation and how this process works. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Donal. Just another quick poll to just kick off this section. So again, on slido.com, following the discovery of a significant escape of water within a property, what is the most critical first step a policyholder should take to aid a successful incident investigation? So if you could all log back onto Slido, website's there, the code's there. We'll just give you 20 seconds to have a think, read the question, and then put your answer in. Just select one of the options, and then Morgan will take us through the answer, and it will nicely lead into the escape of water section of the presentation. Okay, I think I've had about 30 results. Just give you another 5-10 seconds. It looks like the answers aren't showing on the screen for this one, but I think we'll reveal them after we've got about 50 or so. I think that's good. Thanks everyone for your involvement. Let's just have a quick look at the answers then. So it looks like 65% of you have gone through the main water shutoff valve, electric supply, take photos, and not many of you are using towels and buckets to limit the spread. But thank you for your engagement, and I'll hand over to Morgan now.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Donal, for a very comprehensive case study review. When considering escape of water loss, to minimise damage and prevent reoccurrence, I'm going to explore incident response and post-loss investigation matters, namely escape of water incident response. So from the Slido response, the effective emergency response is safety first, mitigate the risk of electrocution, reduce further damage by isolating the water supply, i.e. stopcock valve control, contain the water damage by managing the leak and collecting water, i.e. towels and or bucket, notify the responsible person of the escape of water leak and or emergency plumber, and then finally take a record of the circumstances of the escape of water loss, including photos, videos, or the source of the leak and the extent of type of damage caused. Then when considering modern incident investigation techniques to prevent occurrence or reoccurrence, We can have preventative measures when there are escape of water losses associated with plumbing leaks. That may be more modern and specialist techniques such as thermal imaging, UV dye tracing, acoustic leak tracing, and more traditional methods such as borescope camera inspections of the internal pipework network, more specifically associated with sewer pipes. A swift and well-coordinated response is critical to mitigate damage. A thorough investigation is key to preventing any future incidents. Next slide, please, Matt. So now we're going to look at immediate, underlying and root cause analysis definitions that must be considered, for example, when reviewing the following escape of water property loss example. So an employer leaves a tap running which overflows a sink. The immediate cause is the unattended running tap. The underlying cause, why was the tap left running? The employer was new and had not been properly trained on the end of day shutdown procedures for that area. And then the most fundamental level, root cause, are the organizational management system failures that were created the underlying cause in the first place. A true root cause is one where, if corrected, you would prevent the entire chain of events and potentially many other types of incidences occurring or reoccurring. In the escape of water, for example, in this instance, why wasn't the employer trained? The company has no formal onboarding or safety training program, and new hires aren't allocated a budget or resource to have that fundamental induction undertaken. So going back to what we were discussing in the chat earlier, it was considered a non-essential cost, but it's a cost and it's money that potentially is the root cause to this immediate and underlying failure. So, for example, the root cause is inadequate commitment to training from management. When referring to Heinrich's triangle, identifying trends, it's crucial the next step to understand reviewing the claims, understanding the maintenance record to identify patterns in frequency and type, and where you see more burst pipes or joint failures. The location, are losses concentrated in specific buildings, floors or rooms? And then the root cause, pinpointing the primary summary helps prioritize investment in risk improvement. Next slide, please, Matt. So looking at the left side image, this could be the sink that the tap was left overflowing, but we also need to consider more complex issues that might be the design and installation on the right-hand side. Considering the pipe work where it's copper may have a life expectancy of 50 to 70 years, or the plastic pipe work which is maybe up to 25 years, and the defects that might exist that could lead to a potential loss. So we're looking at the immediate failure of the poor installation, the underlying issues, poor design, and the root cause, failures in connections of the pipes that have led to a leak, for example. Next slide, please, Matt. Now that we've discussed the root cause analysis and explored both management escape of water and poor installation potential escape of water loss scenarios, let's discuss proactive prevention and mitigation strategies using best practice when engineering a resilient property portfolio against plumbing leaks. Areas to consider are the system design of stopcock and valve locations, avoiding combining services in risers, providing adequate drainage outlets and water resistant upstands, whether there's a gap of 25 millimeters below plasterboard, for example, or using a water resilient material such as a cement fiber board or a steel checker plate. Installation needs to allow for ease of access to pipework, avoiding pipework being buried or under screed or behind service risers that aren't accessible. Another example might be plasterwork. Incorporation of leak detection and automatic shutoff and remote monitoring, which can include devices such as humidity sensors and water flow devices, is also a valuable solution. In addition, clearly signposted and labelled routes to enable access for ease of maintenance is very important. And to prevent a false economy, quality assurance and auditing spot checks of plumbing installations, as we saw in the photograph earlier, whether there's any ongoing drip leaks that could lead to a more devastating failure, and the maintenance regimes that are in place, as well as looking at external factors such as poor housekeeping, also needs to be factored in. From this slide, we can identify that effective loss prevention combines robust design, smart technology, and diligent maintenance. The goal is to minimize both the likelihood and the impact of the leak. Next slide, please, Matt. Now I provide a review of a July 2025 property risk management report for a Greater London local authority, which focused on a escape of water loss prevention survey programme to highlight how proactive identification of the underlying causes of escape of water in a real-life case study with targeted actions can mitigate the risk of water-related incidences. If you recall, we looked at that incident earlier where we had the tap left running and the sink overflowing. The findings provide a practical blueprint for the loss prevention and means to identify the root causes toward mitigating against escape of water losses. In summary, the recommendation themes and practical examples that we've already analysed and evaluated in this escape of water segment of the Property Risk Academy, such as frequency, maintenance and clearance of roofs, improved accessibility of water tanks and pipework, including provision of labels and signage, prioritising leak identification and component repairs, enhancing building security and weather-tight resilience of the building, which may be ensuring the roof cover is waterproof or washing through frequently the rainwater gutters so you don't get a scenario where they're overflowing, and then addressing any design vulnerabilities by the root cause analysis. By removing the root cause and closing the loop is achieved. Next slide, please, Matt. Mitigation measures to address escape of water issues follows. So remember the earlier example of an overflowing sink and how the organisation or management system failures created the underlying cause in the first place, with the root cause being one where, if corrected, i.e. inadequate commitment to training from management, it would have been prevented and the entire chain of events that followed stopped, and potentially many other types of incidences from occurring or reoccurring. The mitigation measures would be to induct the employer to prevent the immediate cause, i.e. that water flowing into the sink and the sink overflowing, by properly training the employee on the end of day shutdown procedures. Detailed claims analysis will provide understanding of losses, and we look here at Heinrich's triangle frequency of losses leading to serious claims, which is a conceptual based theory. Well, that concludes this segment of the presentation. Over to you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. So we've just got some of our Protector Risk Management guidance document on the screen now. So we will make these available to you either now during the presentation, if we can work out how to attach these to the chat, or otherwise we'll send you these via email following the presentation. So we've just got plumbing causes, guidance for tenants, and a guidance document on block drains. We'll just say,
Matt, sorry, Matt, just to say, I'm just trying to attach those now, but I'm failing miserably, so I'll try another way.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it could be too good to be true, but we'll get them to you anyway. And I should say, if you've got any queries, then refer to the Protector website or ask your underwriter or Protector risk engineer. Okay, great. So I'll just move on to another quick question. So if you have ever been involved in a post-loss review, did the conclusion of that review lead to a significant change in process? So just log on to Slido, pick one of the four options, either yes, I've been involved and it was significant, the change in process. Yes, I've been involved, or it's been a minor change. There's been no change in process, or most people haven't been involved in a post-loss review, which is positive, I've got to say.
That's a really good. It's a really good thing for us to see, Matt, that our client selection is so good that our clients aren't having the losses.
Yeah, I'll have to give our underwriting team a pat on the back after this presentation. Good news. Okay, thanks for your involvement, everyone. Now it's time to talk through a case study just based on Morgan's slides there. So we're just going to talk through a real life loss that took place in an office, and it was an escape of water loss. So I'll just talk through the event and then relate the event to the 5-step incident investigation process. So step 1, there was an incident. So there was an office that was unoccupied over the weekend period. There was a water leak from a 4th floor, which is the top floor plant room. It first activated a fire alarm. The first signal of the fire alarm was silenced, and then later a second fire alarm signalled off-site, which then sent the fire service to attend the office, but they couldn't enter the premises because there was no key holder present. And because the fire service walked around the building, they couldn't see any smoke, and they determined there was no fire, and they left the premises. Eventually, the leak was discovered by a mobile guard, which is nearly 5 hours after the original fire alarm. What happened with the leak is the water flowed from the calorifier onto the floor of the plant room, overwhelmed the drain, and escaped down into the fabric of the building. So it caused massive damage and resulted in over £1 million loss. So step 2, the investigation. So the initial investigation found that contractors had recently been in to install air source heat pumps and calorifiers within the plant room. So the installation of such involved 54mm copper pipework, press fittings, and also some crimped fittings as well. And this was undertaken by forensic investigators. So step 3, the root cause. So this is where things get interesting. So we've got to work through the immediate and underlying causes to help us get to the root cause. If we remember the 5 whys from earlier slides, we get an immediate cause of the leak was the separation of a press fitting between a copper elbow and a copper pipe. Investigation revealed that the underlying cause in this case was poor workmanship, so the pipe had not been inserted sufficiently into the elbow during the installation. So there are other underlying causes, each with their own distinct root cause, such as leak detection or leak trip systems, but in this example I'm going to focus on the poor workmanship side of things. And the root cause in this case, why have we seen poor workmanship? There could be a few things, so cost cutting, worker skill, worker competence level, but the client in question could probably improve contractor control procedures. So if they had a better handle on contract management and supervision, we may have been able to prevent this loss. So if I just flick over to the next slide, I'm going to talk about step 4 and 5 of the process. So if we look at this issue and loss, and we try and identify mitigations, we found the root cause, which is contractor control. But what we need the client to do is act on this information. It's not enough simply to blame the contractor and move on. So the potential to mitigate future losses by addressing this root cause, we just need to improve the contractor control procedures. And I've put our protector guidance document on this, which we can send out following today's presentation. Or Donal can work out how to put these in the chat function. I'm
trying my best right now. I'm finding another source, but it's failing to do it.
Okay, great. So contractor control procedures. So the main things we want to see improvement on are improving the contractor selection process. What we want is to ensure that competent contractors are used. Usually we'd see this by the completion of a questionnaire and supply the supporting evidence to demonstrate the required skills, knowledge, resources, experience and management systems to deem the contractor competent. We also want an approved contractors list, and this should be reviewed annually. And it's important to ensure a minimum of £5 million public liability cover is in place for contractors' liability insurance. Make sure that there are clear contracts and expectations in place, including the scope of work, timelines, and that we receive good quality risk assessments and method statements from the contractor. And at a client level, risk assessments should be reviewed by a competent person, and they should be site specific. So look out for copy and pasting or incorrect addresses and that type of thing. And lastly, the last point is on-site monitoring. So this ensures that contractor activities are undertaken in a safe manner. All contractors should be assigned a dedicated person responsible for all their actions. They shouldn't be allowed on site unless collected and accompanied by that person. And if periodic checks on the contractor were undertaken, then we could have ensured that work methods are in line with those declared in the method statement. And any contractors in breach of these working methods, then suitable action be taken, be this stopping the work or requesting the contractor leave site. So step 5 of the process in this case is implement these learnings. So now that we've identified the mitigating actions, what we can do is apply this widely across the portfolio, and it should happen for all claims on a continuous cycle of improvement by treating each loss as a learning opportunity. So contractor control procedures are standard across organizations generally, so it's a fairly easy mitigating measure to replicate. And it means that this client can replicate the improved contractor control process across their organization and hopefully prevent losses, not just for escape of water, but coming from all contractors. So now I've got time just for a quick question on this case study. Again, it's on Slido. Hopefully you're all still logged in. The question is, which cause would you prioritize if this loss was at your premises? So we got top floor plant room with water tanks, calorifiers, water leak, and it's unoccupied at the time of leak. So this question is a little different. It's a ranking question. So there's seven points once you log on to Slido, and you've just got to click or drag all 7, and 1 being your most important action. So I'll just wait a few moments for some answers. It may take a little more time than previous questions, but I'll just talk through the options. So we got contract supervisor to inspect work as part of robust contractor controls, leak detection installation to plant room 4th floor, identify how and why the first alarm was silenced, make sure there's sign off from the council after inspection, all the work has been completed, water booster pump leak detection. Oops, sorry, and there's just another one I can't quite see. I've just tried to scroll, but messed around with the presentation. Sorry about that. I'll just give it a couple more moments and then we can talk through what I think, and it's based off the case study, so there should be no surprises, but it's great to see you getting involved with the Slidos today.
It's interesting to see sometimes, Matt, that the one that appears as number 1 to start with often becomes the most primary answer, but it's not necessarily the case, because some of these are post work inspection, some of them are prior to the work inspection. You know, installing leak detection should be undertaken at the very start, you know, before a premises is handed over.
I'm also happy to see, Donal, that one of the lower ranking solutions is to relocate the plant room to the ground floor, because then it would become vulnerable if there's a surface water flood event, or if it's in a flood prone area as well.
Exactly. That's a good risk engineer, Morgan, always thinking about the other hazards and risks that we might face.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both. And like I say, that the choice or option I would probably rank as top would be, like you guys have said, contract supervisor to inspect work as part of robust contractor controls. I really think that managing your contractors, being on top of them, supervising them, making sure they're doing everything they're supposed to be, and then even selecting the most competent contractors you can is probably the best way to stop this leak. And it was the immediate cause of this claim, and the root cause as well. So great, thank you. I'll move on now. Back over to Morgan, who will talk through a case study of a residential block fire.
Thank you, Matt and Donal. We've covered a lot of material so far in the Risk Academy. We've looked at manufacturing production facility risks, those in local authority portfolios, and also in the commercial sector. So let's explore the housing association example that I'm going to talk through. I'm going to use the SPEAR approach, which is giving you the scope of the incident, talking about the presentation, and looking at the evaluation and analysis of the issues that arose from that post-loss review, and also making recommendations and conclusions from it. So next slide, please, Matt. So in this instance, we've got a residential block where a fire has taken hold in the roof void and has spread rapidly throughout the roof void, causing significant damage to the building, specifically the roof. The other consideration as well is having to extinguish that fire. So when there's an amount of water that's poured onto the building, it's going to cause significant damage to the internal fixtures and fittings. So looking at this building, we can see that it's got photovoltaics on it, which isn't uncommon now. And you often remember the old Victorian terraces where you've got an upstand wall between the units, which goes back to the Victorian era to operate as a means of containing the fire from spreading from unit to unit or terrace property to terrace property. So when we got a block similar to the one in the image here, you can see that the photovoltaics, if alight, could potentially transfer that spread of fire across the roof covering between units, where there may be fire separation between the units in place within the roof void, or there may not. You also have to consider any retrospective construction work that took place on the building. It might be a 1960s block, for example, that has had a pitch roof retrospectively installed, and where the concrete slab of that flat roof on the 1960s building operates as a good compartment, it's not the case within the roof void itself with the pitch roof. And pitch roofs, as we know, often contain combustible type materials. So it could be constructed by timber, have a sarking felt that is of a flammability as well. And in addition to that, a lot of modern insulations pose a significant fire risk as well. So in this instance, there was evidence of an arson malice aspect of the fire starting, an accelerant, and there was also consideration of that area being in close proximity to the solar panel inverters or the photovoltaic system as well. So these were factors that were initially suspected. Next slide, please, Matt. So I've seen some matters being raised in the chat about subrogation, and yes, it is a very complex matter when you're having to understand and to identify what caused the risk initially. So in this example, for instance, there was a recall on an aspect of the photovoltaic panel system, which could have potentially been the cause of the ignition, and also it could have led to a more rapid spread of the fire. So that needed to be considered. The police investigation of the accelerant and who may have had intent to cause that malice was also a part of that investigation. So from the review of this post-loss, we can identify that there were potential causes, some of them seeming very obvious, such as the photovoltaics and the accelerant arson attack. And then there was the subrogation. Could we identify whether or not that loss was specifically due to the recall on the photovoltaic system? And then the investigation that took place around that. It's very specialist. Next slide, please, Matt. So from a reinstatement challenge, you've had the loss, and now we're looking at having to reinstate the building, which for example, a 1960s building isn't going to meet current building safety requirements. So you've got that element of reinstatement, which is going to include a betterment to the reinstatement cost. You have to also consider that when you're looking at the value of the works, it's likely to be significantly different as it would be for just simply reinstating on a like-for-like basis. So we've got to comply by the Building Safety Act. We have to adhere to the approved documents. And the upgrade also includes the necessity to have specialist fire safety consultation and design review. So we take this into the lessons learned, and we have to understand that there's a careful negotiation that needs to be taking place between the insured, risk management, ourselves, Protector, the design team, and any other stakeholders involved in that design. And also be conscious of the cost allocations. You can have a best practice response, which is above and beyond what the regulations require, and you're looking at that cost as a betterment to the building, but future-proofing it and being less of a false economy than doing something that is just on the cusp of being compliant, or just getting it over the line of being compliant as well. Next slide, please, Matt.
Morgan, just before you go on, I'd just like to briefly let clients and brokers know about a case, just as you've mentioned there, where there was an 18-metre plus block of flats. On the top floor, there was RARC concrete, the aerated concrete, which needed to be replaced post-loss. However, because it was an 18-metre plus building, maybe now it needs sprinklers. Any constructional work that needed undertaking needed to go to the building safety regulator. But as many of you will know, that the building safety regulator has got some massive backlogs at present because they failed to recruit enough staff. And we, therefore, our claims team can't reinstate until it's been approved by the regulator. So we want to reinstate, obviously, less the RARC concrete, but we can't do it. And we and the client are waiting for the regulator to confirm the process and the type of materials that have been suggested to replace it. So be aware, if you've got 18-metre plus buildings, that the backlog at the regulator is going to affect your claims payment. Thanks, Morgan.
Very helpful information. Thank you, Donal. So going back to the 5 whys that we had earlier in the Risk Academy presentation, and looking at these points on the slide in front of us, which could quite easily be the 5 whys, we're identifying one of the immediate issues of the fire and one of the underlying causes of an arson and malice behaviour. So in terms of access to the roof void, there may be an outwardly open door which offers potential to be forced open. It may also have inadequate controls on it, and that would allow not only for someone with malice to get into the roof space, but also to maybe use the roof space for activities and also storage of goods. And some of the storage could be combustibles, which would increase the fire load and present increased risk for arson. Also, the compartmentation within the roof void, we spoke about in this example, having that slab on the horizontal plane on the floor, if you like, of the roof opening. But within the roof itself, current standards require fire separating walls. And if there were fire separating walls, were there any deficiencies with the fire rating to current compliance standards? If there are any fire doors between those walls, were they left open or were they deficient in some way? Could they have posed a risk to the occupants as well? Another consideration to have. And then we spoke also about the material compliance, and we focused on the timber structure of the roof void, but you may also consider combustible insulation that may be installed without any consideration of compliance or bridging fire compartments, that type of scenario. So all these factors are part of the 5 whys, and also considering the photovoltaic system, if that was installed as panels across the entire roof without any separation between the units, again, that would enable if a fire breaking through the roof or vice versa, a fire breaking from the photovoltaics into the roof, to spread across the compartments on the outer face of the roof itself. And if, for example, there's water tanks within the roof void as well, those water tanks could be susceptible to breakages or failure during the fire event and release the water, which could potentially wash through any fire stopping that was present between the compartmentation, whether that was around services or openings. For example, a fire bat, it's very good at stopping a fire event, but when it becomes damp and saturated, it simply disintegrates and it's no longer fit for purpose. So next slide, please, Matt. Considering those technical deficiencies and the mitigating measures in terms of rolling out a rectification or lessons learned over a portfolio, and we've touched on that as well earlier in the presentation, it's looking to ensure that security is adequate on a premises. Donal's example is fundamental to that, where there were numerous access points. In a roof void, for example, there might be only 1 or 2. And is the door adequate in terms of a steel framed door with adequate security controls? They were present in Donal's example, but there are other avenues getting into the building around that as well. So these things need to be assessed. And by having a good understanding of the security and the controls in place, you may also be able to monitor that for benefit of the organisation in terms of undertaking an assessment of the maintenance, who's going in and out of the roof void, who has allocation to it, is it necessary for the activities they're performing, the frequency of the ingress into that area. And then we need to consider the roof compartmentation and fire stopping. You need to look at the location of where the risers may be, how many service penetrations are there, are they needed, can they better be rerouted at alternate locations, and if there was a fire, is it the fire compartment up to standard? Is it going to hold back a fire for 2 hours? It may even need to be up to 4 hours if it's a specific type of function within an occupancy, such as a main electrical switch room, LV room, etc. So then looking at material compliance and design, the golden thread is so important, and Donal touched on it earlier with the rack example, but building safety regulators now and the principal accountable person is something that's built into the design process. And unfortunately, it has become evident with many of our clients that there is a backlog to delivering on these projects as a consequence of the building safety regulator having such a workload that they're unable to achieve their the statutory timeframes or the input that you might get backwards and forwards through simple consultation dialogue. Then we explored the photovoltaic aspect. We spoke about the transfer of the fire across the upper roof covering and potential of it coming up through the roof void or going from the roof down into the roof void. And you want to be ensured that you've procured the solar system correct, or the photovoltaic system correctly, and it's installed correctly by competent people to the highest standard that is needed, if not above and beyond meeting the evolution of technology as it comes available. And then once it's installed, it's that ongoing maintenance, the frequency of having to ensure that there's no detritus, especially around this time of the year where you've got a large amount of organic debris from the autumn leaf fall, and it's November, December is a good time to ensure that all the components are clear of that type of debris and there's no build-up of something that could potentially be an ignition source and lead to a loss event. So a little bit further into the presentation, we'll talk about some of the guidance that we have and make that available to you. And then looking at the water tank scenario, we're going back to the 5 whys and looking at these mitigation measures as the root cause. Is there an alternative to having the water tanks in the roof? Could you have a system that doesn't need a water tank, for example, and is a direct feed into the units? Can the water tanks be better protected? Can they be relocated so they may not compromise the fire compartmentation? If they're located near a riser, could they be better water protected underneath in terms of catchment of drips or any minor leakage to prevent that running into a service riser and compromising the fire compartmentation by service fire stopping, etc. We talked about the fire bats earlier as an example. Very good at stopping fire, but when they're wet, simply disintegrate. Next slide, please, Matt. So I'd encourage you to review the photovoltaic system guidance. I've touched on it before about procuring, installing and maintaining. And look, from a risk management proposition, we're always here to help, and we encourage you as the client to approach us with any projects that you've got so that we can assist in design reviews, and we can offer helpful guidance even if a system's installed to how you may upgrade that or you may look to future-proof it. And then obviously the ongoing maintenance that's so necessary and to prevent any loss events occurring. We don't want to be in a situation of a false economy where you're not undertaking something that is of a nominal cost but could lead to such greater loss. And the satisfaction that we get as risk engineers is preventing that business interruption, occupants being disrupted from going about their day-to-day activities. Well, that concludes that segment of the presentation. Across to you, Matt and Donal. Thank you.
Yeah, just to say, in the chat, I've put the link to the Protector Risk Management webpage. As I have said in the chat, we're unable to attach these documents into the chat, unfortunately. So Matt will ensure that they are attached to the risk management webpage rather than emailing anybody individually. But you can contact us individually if you wish, if you want to talk through these guides with us. On to you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Donal. I believe we are now on to our concluding remarks for the day. Thanks, Morgan, for talking through your case study. That was really useful for me. But Donal, I believe this one's for you.
Indeed. So this is the conclusion to the 3 case studies, really. What we want you to do is treat every major loss as a deep learning opportunity. That's the way we look at it, and we would love for you to do that. We know that you might not have the resources to do so, and you may not always be able to record your smaller losses because they come under the deductible. But as markets change, as insurance changes, sometimes the deductible levels change, and it's in the future we're unable to identify what would have fallen into a lower deductible when we're pricing risks going forward. So the more data that you have on every loss, not just the major losses, the better it is for us as insurers and as risk managers to help you foresee what might be coming down the line, using the 5 whys, looking at the losses and saying, could we have prevented that either from happening, or put some kind of blocker in there to somewhere along the process to prevent it getting as bad as it did. We'd like you to challenge the like-for-like mindset. So in the case of the large tower block in London that I talked about, where they can't physically replace the rock concrete, but they do need to replace the concrete, it's a structural piece, with something lightweight, because obviously that was part of the original design. So we've got to take account of those modern regulations, the Building Safety Act, and sometimes betterment is a non-negotiable issue. It's just the original materials are no longer available or no longer legal. So the reinstatement of a loss must meet the current, not original standards. But honestly, we would love for you to go above the legal minimum. Go above building regs, because that's the lowest level common denominator that all the professions work to. If you have a standard that you want to work to, then introduce that, set it at a higher level than building regs, and clearly we'll be a lot happier as insurers if that's the case. Obviously, next step is investigating the causation thoroughly. What you think may have been the cause may not have been the actual proximate cause, the causative effect, which led to the size of the loss. Okay, so think about what the true root cause of the risk was. In terms of the learnings to prevent next losses, apply all your learnings about underinsurance, design flaws, material issues, take them across your wider portfolio. I have a call this afternoon talking about timber frame buildings and what's good with them, what's bad with them. Take forward that modern materials are good, but only in the right location. So if it's a flood exposure, then you don't want to have a timber frame building, for example. So we need to know an awful lot more about the premises that we're insuring. If you have a post-loss review that only looks at the one property that's failed, then you're not using the information to learn a wider improvement on the whole portfolio. Excuse me. From our position as insurers, obviously we insure lots of different portfolios, and what we want to do is take the learnings we have from any loss, any significant loss that we have, and share that learning amongst our clients, so that in future our clients don't have those losses. You may have industry bodies where you might share that information secretively. Any service provision that you can to share losses and what you can do to prevent them in the future is going to be beneficial. And don't forget that post-loss review is a process, it's not a report. So thinking about a case that Matt and I looked at, where there was a vacant building, Matt went to visit it almost immediately after we were notified that it became vacant. There were some issues with youths congregating around it, and there was some Harris fencing around it. But because we'd suffered the loss that I talked about before, not too far away, Matt said, you need to do X, Y, and Z to this building to protect it, and he gave the client 14 days to do so. Unfortunately for us, it partially burnt down in 10 days, but the prescient information that we gained from the previous cases allowed us to help the client to prepare for the future. And obviously that client, still a client, and recognizes why we give that information as quickly as we can. So next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so going back to the start of the presentation, I thought, is this individual loss a single linear process, or is it a cyclical or round process where you learn from something and you can deliver change that matters, that you can measure and improve your risk response? So thinking about what you've got what we call the risk management wheel of time on the right hand side. We're looping and referencing back to examples from the past where we've lost to help us protect for the future and develop and deliver prevention techniques. So collecting individual loss data is not as effective as a portfolio level in that linear side on the left hand side. However, it is useful to add that data into your portfolio position so that you can look at all your buildings of the same type and see whether you're likely to suffer the same kinds of losses on the overall portfolio. So just to review where you are, at which point in that cyclical cycle you might be at present. Think about it, think how much more work you might need to do, what processes you might need to implement to help you get to that stage of doing the root cause analysis, putting together some potential mitigations, and then implementing the learnings and the measures, reviewing how effective they have been in helping you stop suffering those losses in the future. We've talked about different examples: fire, escape of water. It's easy also to apply this to flood, probably less so to some of the lesser perils like subterranean fire. Fortunately, that doesn't happen too often. We also think that you probably at present can't apply it to lightning, but as the weather patterns change, it may be the case that you will be able to apply these kind of processes to those what we call minor perils. So risk prevention will help you or us to help you enable minimum loss, earliest recovery, and therefore a lower loss value. So from our perspective, the cyclical nature of policy level risk mitigation is and looping round is the important part. In the incident investigation element of the guidance document that we will make available on the website after this, then you'll be able to see how that cyclical process goes around, and hopefully you'll be able to adopt it. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Donal. And I'd just like to conclude with one last poll of the day. So following the presentation today, we'd just like to ask you again on Slido, where do you think you are on the investigation process, the risk management wheel of time, as we've just seen in the previous slide, and have been discussing in the entire presentation. So it's the same question and the same answers at the start of the presentation. And what we want to do is see if you as the attendees have learned something today, or you may not have learned something today. So as many responses as we can get, that would be amazing. And I'll just give it a couple of seconds to get a few responses.
As you can see in the chat, by the way, many people have asked, can we receive the slides? Yes, you can. Just follow the slides through to the end. There is a feedback form, and once you complete the feedback form, you can have access to the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Donal. And yeah, let's see the results then. I think this is very similar to the responses at the start of the presentation. I can't quite remember. I think the data will be stored in the cloud somewhere, but I think it was roughly about 32% for number 4 at the start of the presentation. So either way, you may not have learned something, but hopefully you have, and can take something away with you today from this presentation. But thank you for your input and contribution today. It's been good. And as Donal's just alluded to, we've got a feedback QR code. I've got the link to our feedback. I'll just paste it in the chat now.
Thanks, Matt.
If you could give us it only takes 30 seconds, just give us a bit of brief feedback on today's presentation, and we will be able to send slides following completion of this. Just to add as well, we do have some online resources, as Donal's alluded to. That's our website, protectorinsurance.co.uk. We've got a description of our proposition, the latest news, and a selection of our guidance documents, loss bulletins and toolkits. And the guidance documents referenced today will be uploaded onto our website if they're not there already. And just Indeed. To put our disclaimer of the day on to end today's presentation. But thank you all for listening.
And thank you all very much for your feedback. It's much appreciated. My apologies. There was one question from Henry. Are you still available to ask the question, Henri?
I think he will. He'll be struggling to talk, Donal, so we may have to. Has he typed it in the chat?
Oh no, it was an error. I see. That's okay. Thanks,
That's
Henri.
good. That was an error. The link to the survey isn't working. Okay.
We'll see if we can find another way to make that happen.
Okay, I'll just go back to the feedback anyway. So there's QR code on the screen if you've got your mobile phone. Hopefully that works if the link doesn't work.
Yeah,
thank you.
take a photograph with that QR code. I might do it for you, Matt. I might give you some feedback.
Positive only, please, Donal. The survey link works. Feedback done. Okay, so it may be not working for all of you.
So the slides are available from once we get the details from the feedback, we can send those slides out to you individually. Is that correct, Matt?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So we will send them on to you once we get your email details from the SurveyMonkey.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, guys. I'll end the event now. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.